All right, friends, welcome. We are going to get rolling. So welcome to everyone who's joined today. We're going to talk about how to effectively steward planned, major, and giving donors in 2020. A big thank you to everyone who shared all the things that brought them joy this week. One of the big things for me that's been really wonderful this week is actually spending the past weekend and much of this week in the great state of Vermont. So I was able to get out of New York City for a short amount of time. So different background, different, there's a sort of a fireplace and a bunch of other things behind me. But I did want to show everyone the view from the other side. You can see it. We'll see if we can do that delicately. So those are the Green Mountains of Vermont. It's really nice to get out of the hot and sweaty New York City, Manhattan sidewalks right now. So thrilled to be here with a couple of friends, one of whom is working for the State Department and literally working on Middle East peace on the outside porch, and a couple other folks as well. So really excited to be here. Also really excited for Claire and Cathy, who are our guests, who we'll talk about in just a moment. So I saw some folks in New Hampshire and Vermont nearby, so I will wave to you from somewhere near Stratton Mountain. Quick note for today, as we've gotten a lot better at making this happen, so this is CFRE approved for 1 credit hour, 1.0 credits. You can also go watch the recordings. Just as a note, because we get some questions about these sometimes, these are self-reported. So you are keeping a list of the webinars and the other sessions that you've attended in order to get your 15 hours of credit in order to continue your education and stay CFRE approved. So that's there for you. Just make sure you note it in the survey later on. All right, so we'll do some quick today's agenda, quick intros, talk about some broad trends in stewardship in 2020. And we're really lucky to have 2 expert guests, Claire and Cathy. They're wonderful. I'll tell you how wonderful they are in a moment. I'm going to share a few more strategies for successful stewardship, and then we'll do next steps in Q&A. And luckily, Claire and Cathy will stick around for that. Many of you know me, but my name is Patrick. I am the co-founder and co-CEO of FreeWill, alongside my brilliant and wonderful co-founder, Jenny. And we're also really lucky to be joined by all these amazing people who, when this was taken, were not socially distancing back in, say, February, but are stuck together to a remarkable degree. We're really proud of how our team's done during COVID. Really wonderful humans, mostly in New York City, at this point all around the country. So we asked folks how your week is going. And one thing we saw is that anxiety is coming back. And I think about being around the country and some of the hotspots that are happening, this is getting a little bit worse. And so we're seeing more than 40% of folks are reporting anxious. Many of those folks are also happy, but it's something to keep an eye on, and hopefully we can stick together and be really helpful here. We've also asked folks what they're worried about, and people have seemed to gotten a little bit more of a handle on health and safety and are back to being nervous about hitting goals. So hopefully we can help share some strategies today that will make it a lot easier. So what are we seeing in terms of stewardship in 2020, and what problem are we solving? First things, we're obviously seeing the end of events and visits, at least temporarily, maybe for quite a while. And so in-person stewardships are the single most common way that people use to build relationships with planned and major giving donors. The current estimate that we have, that is now being echoed by a lot of folks, is that these are unlikely to happen for the rest of 2020. I just got news that the city of Philadelphia is banning all gatherings of more than 50 people until at least February. Google announced yesterday that they won't ask their employees to come back to the office until July of 2021. So a lot of this is happening, and most of those, the Google workforce is relatively young and healthy. And so compared to many older planned or major giving donors, we'll be even more cautious here. So things like luncheons, reunions, events around sports matches at colleges or high schools, high-end dinners, et cetera, these are all sort of off the table for at least a good bit of time, and we're gonna have to move to plan B. So that's one trend. The second trend is that we're seeing a couple of different types of giving arise, and many of these givings lead to unintentional anonymous giving. So in the last 2 years, and these are folks over 70, qualified charitable distributions, a new tool of many major donors, have grown by nearly 3x in the charitable giving world. But 76% of nonprofits say that a lack of donor information is their single biggest challenge around qualified charitable distributions. Same thing with donor advised funds, which have been rising for a longer period of time, but about 20% year over year. Nonprofits say that 15 to 20% of DAF, donor advised fund gifts, come without donor information. So you have these major donors who you don't even know, which is step one in stewardship. And then these donors go unthanked, and without the right tax acknowledgements, they can become angry or disillusioned. You can imagine how hard it might be to make a $20,000 gift and then hear crickets from the nonprofit. And particularly, this is important because both the donor advised fund and the QCD donors don't actually know that their information is not being transferred by the custodian. So we'll talk more about some strategies there in a bit. Third big trend is this massive growth of planned giving donors. So if you're in planned giving, or even if you are in major giving and you think these planned giving folks are likely to be major donors in the short term, you can see what this looks like. And this is on our site, Bequests by month. And so these very sharp spikes, a little bit to the left of the end here, are April and May. June was a little bit quieter. And then July is sort of back off the charts. This purple line is the overall trend that we're expecting in July. Just to put that in context, if you look at the spike to the farthest of the left, that was around July of last year. And there was a major AARP article about FreeWill, mailed to 37 million Americans. And you can see how much higher the giving is now without that major press than it was at one of potentially the biggest PR story that we will ever have. And then the last thing, we talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago, but we're holding these two things in dichotomy right now, and real tension. So on the left side, you have unemployment hitting record high, even greater than the Great Depression. And on the right side, NASDAQ and the Dow Jones and S&P are also hitting record highs because the market is anticipating a vaccine, a return to economic growth, a rebound in spending. So what it means is that the folks who are not as well off are even worse off, and the folks who are well off are even better off, because this is combined with lower spending overall. So you might have more disposable income than they had not in coronavirus, which is sort of wild in a global recession. What it means is that your planned and major donors are even more important than ever compared to annual giving. And so getting these right and stewarding these folks in a difficult time will be incredibly important to the survival and to the thriving of your organization. Marion asked, what do we make sense of the planned giving spike? Well, in planned giving historically, you want to sort of think about major life events as driving new estate planning. So the birth of a child, the birth of a grandchild, moving to a new state, buying a new home. And in many ways, coronavirus is a major life event for basically the entire country right now. And people are thinking a lot more about their own mortality. They also have a lot more time on their hands. So these things are happening at the same time. All right, so that's the backdrop that we're dealing with in this relatively chaotic moment. And we need to figure out where do we go from here. So we have two really great guests to help us navigate this. The ThinkGiving, which is a planned giving and major giving consultancy. She went to North Dakota State University, go Bison, and TCU, go Horned Frogs. But among other things, at one point was the chair of National CGP, which is Charitable Gift Planners, runs the AFP chapter in Fort Worth, which is her home city at this point, is on the board of the American Council on Gift Annuities, is just everybody's favorite person in this world, and we're so lucky to have Cathy. And then Cathy's favorite person is this wonderful woman named Claire Meyerhoff, who we'll hear from in a second. Claire has an extraordinary story where she went to American University in DC, got into journalism and communication with CNN, had a show on Sirius Radio, and then started doing some philanthropic work and realized that her communication background brought this whole new expertise that a lot of nonprofits didn't have. So now she's the president of the Planned Giving Agency, where she helps a lot of different nonprofits think about how to communicate and storytell and really build great relationships using communication. So we're super excited to have Claire and Cathy. Oops. And so I'll invite you guys to join video and unmute yourselves if you can. If not, just give me a wave and I'll make it happen for you.
I'm unmuted.
Okay.
I'm
Perfect.
unmuted.
I think we're unmuted.
welcome Claire, and welcome Cathy.
Thank you.
Before we do anything fancy here, maybe starting with Claire, what is just one thing that's bringing you joy this week?
One thing that's bringing me joy this week? I think just being able to live a little bit more healthy lifestyle after months of eating everything in sight during coronavirus. And in the last couple of weeks, I've started eating more healthy. And I went for a bike ride this morning before the webinar. So that's what's bringing me a little bit of joy and hopefully a few less pounds.
And Cathy, what about you?
You know, I've been spending a lot of time reconnecting with some friends on the phone over the last few weeks. And so it's just been, you know, things in Texas are changing a little bit right now with the coronavirus. So things are starting to go back down on lockdown. But yeah, I've been using the telephone and walking away from video calls and using just the phone more.
That's amazing. Great, well, let's dive in. You guys are real experts here, so we're excited to have you. First things, we've seen record numbers of new planned giving donors, as we just talked about. What are the key strategies when a donor first shows up?
I'll start. And I'm having a little delay with my computer, so I can't tell if that's me or y'all. So I'm just gonna keep talking and hopefully I'm not frozen. I love this question because it literally has the word strategies combined with stewardship. And I think that often nonprofits have a very passive approach at stewardship. The gift comes in, they may thank the donor, and that's pretty much the extent of a formal program. So I love seeing key strategies in the same sentence with the word stewardship. I think that it does need to be incredibly strategic. Stewardship increases the image of your organization, the reputation of your organization, and the priority with your donors that are current and future, major and planned, with where your organization falls in their mind. And at the very, very basic level, stewardship is all about a relationship building and communication process that takes place the second that gift comes in the door. And I have 3 strategies. I'm borrowing the way my friend Claire approaches everything, but I have 3 strategies that I'm using for really good stewardship. So the first one is manage the gift the way the donor intended it. So you want to make sure you're doing that. Update the donor on the impact of their gift. If it's a future gift, if it's a planned gift and it's a future gift, you can still update them on the impact of that future gift. If they're a current donor, definitely keep them posted on how that gift is impacting the organization, and initiate that cultivation strategy. The third one is initiate the cultivation strategy for the next gift, because the key to successful stewardship is that it's the beginning of the donor life cycle. Cultivation and stewardship meet each other on that life cycle. So, you know, obviously you're going to want to thank the donor for their gift. You're going to want to confirm the intended use and how they want their name listed, whether that's for a legacy society or for just the gift. And you want to make sure that you're meeting their intentions and expectations and matching that appropriately with how you recognize their gift, and start cultivating for that next gift. So as our friend, who we all love to quote, Russell James, says, that if it's a planned gift donor that you're stewarding, if you're stewarding them properly, they will increase their giving significantly in the next few years. He had a paper that was published several years ago called Cash is Not King. That one said it would increase 75% over the next 5 years. He just recently released a newer version that had some different breakdowns of the years. So I would encourage you to go get that to read it. But he reinforces the fact that good stewardship and the proper induction of a planned giving person will result in greater gifts to your organization that are outright.
Yeah, I love that. And Claire, you have a really helpful analogy in terms of welcoming new donors. Do you want to share that?
I can share that. I like to treat the person who's in charge of stewarding the donor. Maybe it's the plan giving director or the executive director or the development director. And I like to tell them, think of yourself as a host. Or a hostess. So when someone comes to your house to a party, the first thing you do is you greet them warmly, right? You thank them for coming. That's very important. The next thing you do is you probably show them around a little bit. You say, well, you can put your coats in this bedroom. Yeah, the beer is in the bathtub, in the bathroom, and things like that, right? You kind of show them around a little bit. And so in plan giving, you want to show them around a bit by telling them off the bat, like, here are some of the wonderful things available to you as a plan giving donor. Here are your benefits. These are the different things you're entitled to, and we hope you take advantage of that. The next thing that a good host or hostess does, they don't just leave their guests there. They introduce them to other people at the party and make them feel at home. And they try to introduce them perhaps to someone who can elevate them a little bit. So if they're new to the neighborhood, they introduce them to someone who's been there a long time and they have things in common. So in plan giving stewardship, the analogy is, especially these days, you want to introduce your donors to your plan giving donors to interesting people. So now that we are in this virtual phase, it's a wonderful time to invite your plan giving donors. So let's say you're a college and you have a local celebrity. You've got this wonderful person who went to your college. Have a very special Zoom meeting with that celebrity and just your plan giving and maybe some higher level donors. You could invite a local meteorologist from your local TV station on if you're a local organization, and people would maybe love to get some insights from them, or a business reporter or a science reporter, something that's timely. If you're a hospital, you can have a top doctor on, or again, a medical reporter, and they would be happy to do that. So I like to think of the whole stewardship experience as a little bit as, you're a gracious host and hostess. And because I do marketing and I do a lot of writing, I tend to take that tone when you're writing, like I'm the host, I'm this nice person and I'm welcoming you, and I want to make sure you're happy and you're comfortable. So that's one of my little things about stewardship. Be a good host or hostess to your plan giving donors.
I love that. Claire and Cathy, you both work with a lot of organizations and you see a lot of organizations. Who do you think does this just phenomenally well?
So specific organizations, I will not be able to share specific organizations. I will say that those who do it well as a group, as an industry, are the much larger organizations that have donor relations departments. So universities, healthcare offices, where they specifically have a department that's their full-time goal is to just steward every donor that makes a gift to the organization. And the ultimate goal of stewardship is to make that donor feel like they are the most important donor the organization has, to make them feel and be appreciated in a way that no other organization appreciates them. So make sure you're stepping up your game to be able to do that. I prefer organizations that create a matrix, that create a stewardship matrix around different points of recognition and gratitude, and then again incorporate some cultivation. And literally has all donors of a gift of a certain size get this, 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 and this. Another level, this, 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 and this. And a different level, here, here, here. And here's our Legacy Society level all the way across. And I've got an example I'll share here in the chat room of this, just a generic stewardship matrix. But I encourage organizations to have a stewardship matrix that tells everyone within the organization how a donor will be recognized and what the recognition levels are. And then even further, create individual or segmented stewardship matrix so that you can take a group, say your Legacy Society. Our Legacy Society members are going to have these 25 touch points throughout the year. Maybe an email, it may be a newsletter, it may be a phone call, it may be a birthday card, it may be a Valentine's Day card, whatever it is. And then who is responsible for initiating that? And I'll share a sample matrix in the group, but there's so many different ways that you can excel at this. Claire, I'll let you.
Well, one thing I'd like to say right off the top really is that the Legacy Society as a whole, as a thing, and the experience around it and the people in it and how the organization treats it is not just about the people in the Legacy Society and the stewarding of those people. It's how it looks to the rest of your organization and also to other donors and also the outside world. So that's where the public relations comes in. So for instance, if you went on an organization's Facebook, you wouldn't really see anything about planned giving. You just wouldn't, because they're talking about all this other stuff. But one of our participants, Dawn from Gettysburg, said that today she has been filming some donor interviews. And so if you can get like just, you interview this donor, get a nice little soundbite, write a cute little story, have some snappy graphics, and you put that on Facebook, like that's a cool video. And you can say that they're part of this legacy society. So it's really, I like to think of it sort of at I take it to the end and go, well, what would it look like if I could just wave a magic wand and do these things? So a nice legacy society would have like a nice logo, like a nice sort of an image or a logo, because you can do things with that. You can put it on a slide for your virtual event and thank your planned giving donors. If you don't have the logo, you have nothing to put on the slide. If you don't have a pin, you have no pin to talk about. I've worked in planned giving now about 12 years. And when I first started, I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I wrote newsletter articles and did entire newsletters for nonprofits. And I would work with the planned giving director. And I would learn so much from these I've learned from the nicest planned giving directors in the nation. And so with the pin, I had one lady and she was like, well, you know what? We give people the pin. They just put it in their jewelry box and that's it. I go, well, what do you tell them to do with it? Oh, nothing. Well, you should do lots with it. So you should encourage people to wear the pin to their event, right? So they have the pin, say, oh, you're coming to this event, please wear your pin. And when people ask, you can tell them. Also, if you have a pin, when you have a volunteer appreciation luncheon or dinner, you can invite up onto the stage your new members of your legacy society in front of a whole group of these wonderful volunteers and give them their pin. So if you don't have a pin, you have nothing to do with your pin. So you need a really good back end in a legacy society. So I just worked with an organization in Chicago and we started with a logo, and it was basically just taking like their logo, putting a circle around it saying legacy society, boom, you have a logo. It looks really pretty. And then we were kind of in a hurry because they had their first virtual event. And I had suggested if we could do a slide in the course of the event, thanking the Legacy Society donors. So that was great because that put us on the fast track to get this logo done. So we got the logo and we wrote this nice little slide and it went over very well. So you need a good back end for your Legacy Society, and don't underestimate the things like a little logo or a pin, and things like good donor stories and good photographs and things like that. So there's a lot of back end to a legacy program because it has to look good to the rest of the public.
Great, that's good.
Is Patrick gone?
I think.
There he is. Patrick, your mic is off.
Yeah, we lost you for a few minutes, Patrick.
Patrick's mic is off and he's a little frozen. Cathy, you and I might have to handle this for our
There
Vermont,
he's back.
Vermont host.
He's
back. It's Patrick.
He's still on mute.
Are you still on mute?
There he goes.
How's this? Excellent.
Hey, Patrick. Welcome back.
Thank you. We are dealing with some internet challenges over here.
Yeah.
I thought Claire's point was so great that it is typically one of the most missed, I think, ideas in stewardship, which is stewardship is also a marketing opportunity. So just to double down on that. And specifically, I recall being 3 or 4 years ago now at the Seattle Children's Hospital. And I don't know if anyone on the call has been, feel free to name it in the chat, but the wall of Legacy Society donors is so prominent and so large as you walk into the hospital, and every tour of the hospital walks by it. And it's basically impossible not to want your name on this. And at this point, there are so many donors on that. It represents well over $2 billion in terms of pledged gifts, just enormous. And I don't have children. I don't live in Washington State. I don't really know that many people in Seattle. And I still spend a lot of time thinking, oh, should I be a planned giving donor here? Because it's so appealing. And so it's a really great, a great way to bring in new donors while you're thanking other folks. This is a great question. You guys have learned so much, but also you run a podcast together, which I highly, highly recommend. So would love to hear about any insight you've gotten from recent guests or what you've learned in that process from all of the amazing folks that you talked to there.
Well, we've had some wonderful recent guests. And so we're a new podcast. but we've had great guests. So our first guest was Bill Strickland, and he's the plan giving officer with the California Community Foundation in Los Angeles. We talked a lot about donor advised funds and also the situation in LA with COVID. So he was our first guest. Our second guest was Alex Brovey from Northwell Health in New York City. So that was healthcare philanthropy. She was a great guest. Then our third guest was Jackie Freeney from the Nature Conservancy, and we did a great show on non-cash assets, and that was very popular. And our fourth guest, which just went up, was with Diane Belk, and she is a super volunteer with the Girl Scouts of America, and she has, in our opinion, practically single-handedly created this awesome plan giving program at Girl Scouts and does this amazing outreach. She just goes out and talks to groups, and she's a super evangelist. And then we have Tia Graham coming up, and she is with the PBS Foundation, and she's coming up. And then we have another we have a Mythbusters segment coming up with two plan giving people on. We're going to bust some myths about plan giving on Charitable Chit Chat with Cathy and Claire.
You know, Patrick, you started out asking us what's been bringing us joy, and selfishly, that's what's been bringing us a lot of joy during the pandemic, because we had been talking about this for a while, about starting our podcast, which is Charitable Chit Chat with Cathy and Claire, and we literally started it during this, because we found ourselves with a little bit more time on our hands and able to learn how to do it. And I encourage you, definitely check out the Diane Belk interview, the one that the Girl Scouts volunteer, because she's, like Claire said, single-handedly took that within 10 years, took their legacy society from 439 members to over 4,000 some odd members. It was we did the math on it. It was like 1,200% increase or something like that.
We'd never heard
in
of anything
10
like that.
years. So yeah, definitely something to check out.
Amazing. And Cathy, what's one or two of the things you learned from Diane?
Well, with Diane, you know, she picked up, okay, the first thing that I learned from her, find a good volunteer, because she is a champion, and she is 100% volunteer of Girl Scouts. She and her husband decided to make a planned gift to the Girl Scouts. They were heading up to the city in which the national office was in New York, was heading up to New York, and she just decided to swing by their office, and the person she had scheduled to meet with wasn't available, and they sat her down with the CEO. And out of that initial 10-minute conversation with the CEO became this huge fireball of advocacy in the form of Diane Belk, who has single-handedly championed their initiative. So find a very, very good champion and volunteer.
And she's very motivational, because she is just a regular person. She's not a plan giving expert like Cathy, and she is just a volunteer, and she is passionate about Girl Scouts. And so she has found a way to just speak to people about their passion for Girl Scouts, and then to just ask them, would you consider including Girl Scouts in your estate plans? And we asked her this question. We said, you know, so many organizations struggle with asking people this. And she's like, and she has this big Southern accent. She goes, the struggle, I just don't understand the big struggle, she said. And she said, what is so hard about talking with someone about why they support your organization, and then asking them if they would consider including a gift in their long-term charitable plans?
Yeah.
And it really struck me, because so often we work with organizations, and they spend all this time doing all this other stuff, and they don't spend much time just asking. And frankly, if you got more board members and different people to ask their friends, you would have many more planned gifts. And we talk a lot about, how to get your board on board with planned giving. Well, get everyone on your board to make a planned gift, and then ask them, hey, could you ask 3 friends, each board member? And you would increase your planned giving society at some organizations by double just by doing that. So it's really all about the asking. I
would venture to guess that she doesn't leave a stone unturned, because when we were interviewing her, she found out I was a brownie in Girl Scout. She already knew Claire was, and in the middle of this conversation, she solicited me to join the Legacy Society. So I mean, she does not, if she knows, and we all hope that we have volunteers that are that passionate. about our organizations. And yes, Claire was inducted.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to Diane. I had a 2-hour conversation with Diane before we interviewed her, and she was just great. And I learned so much from her, and it was so much fun. And then I went to the Girl Scouts website just to sort of check it out, see what they had going on with their plan giving. And they had a little widget. It's like, are we in your plans? And I'm like, well, let's see what that looks like. And I looked at it and I thought to myself, well, you know what? It's like, I think the Girl Scouts is an awesome organization. That's a great way to bring girls up from all walks of life so they can succeed. And I enjoyed my time in the Girl Scouts. So I have this IRA and I needed to update the beneficiary. So I split it between Girl Scouts and another organization. So during our podcast, she pinned me and she sent this to me in the mail beforehand, the beautiful Girl Scouts of America pin that everyone should have their own beautiful pin like that. So no, she's doing it.
That's wild. I think one thing that's really interesting here is that all of this got unlocked because she was able to sit down with the CEO and they asked her to volunteer. And, you know, the corollary of so much unspent income because people are stuck at home, there's also, that's just a signal of unspent time, right? Fewer vacations, fewer dinners out, fewer concerts and plays. And my guess is that almost every nonprofit listening is underutilizing volunteers in that capacity, right? Especially if you're, you know, resource constrained, as many of our organizations are. Think, okay, well, who wants to step up and be sort of an assistant director of plan giving in your donor base? And you likely have a lot of very recent retirees who are potentially strong former business people, former CFOs, former salespeople who have these skill sets and have the time to really dedicate with it. And you might find that you're uncovering a gold mine of new resources within your own donor base. And we'll talk more about even using that to steward new gifts as well. So, Cathy, what was the name of the book that you suggested we read? Someone asked that in the chat.
I saw that.
It may be.
Go ahead.
It may be the Russell James study, which we can include in the email afterwards.
It was, because I was like, I don't think I said that, but yeah, it was.
Yeah, and we'll share the matrix as well. We're almost out of time here. Before we get to how people can reach you, which I'll ask in a second, any just sort of final guiding words of wisdom?
I say with stewardship, be intentional. Knock their socks off with stand out in what you're doing to thank them. Be consistent. Remember that stewardship needs to be consistent. You do want to be individualized and personalized, but you definitely want to be consistent. And make sure that you have gift policies that represent what that recognition and how that stewardship should play out. Gift acceptance policies are going to be really helpful there.
Great.
Claire,
any final wisdom that you want to share?
Some final wisdom might just be just do something. So oftentimes people are overwhelmed and they hear all this stuff and they're like, oh, I'm going to have to start a committee like before I even start this and we have to study it and make a plan. Just pick one thing. And I like to do projects. So when I come to work with a new client, I say, okay, we're going to do all these things in the future, but right now let's pick one of these projects and start on it because people like the idea of a project. So right now a good project might be to survey your plan giving donors. It doesn't take much to come up with a little survey that's not a big deal, and with a little letter and mail it to them and ask them just a few questions and they can write down some impressions and things like that. So you could do a survey right now and that would be an easy little project that would steward your donors by asking them for their advice and impressions.
Well, can I say one more thing there? I love that idea,
Sure.
Claire. Another thing is create a panel of donors and ask them how they want to be thanked. Bring them in and create like a little council, a stewardship council that helps you and talk about recruiting volunteers. That's going to be a really wonderful way to get some of those folks on board. Because again, the goal in most of this doesn't cost very much money. So the goal of this is just to stand out, make sure that they stand out.
All right, thank you guys so much. Before we go, and we'll bring you back for questions in a moment, but how can people who want to learn more from you, who want to work from you, want to work with you, how can they reach out?
Well, they can reach us out via email, and we would like to offer as a special to anyone on this webinar. We've done this before and it's worked out very nicely. It's $100, so it's like this little nominal fee. And for that, you get a lot of time on the phone or a Zoom with me and Cathy, and you can tell us all about your Plan Giving program. You can send us all your materials and talk about your problems and what's going on. And we'll spend a lot of time with you. Then we'll write you up like a nice little 2-page report and send it to you. You can have as many people on the call as you like. So just send me an email, claire@pgagency.com, or Cathy at ThinkGiving, and we would be happy to do that. It's a great way to help people out for a really low cost, and you can learn a lot in a short amount of time. And of course, visit our website and listen to our podcast, charitableChitChat.com, on Spotify.
Amazing.
iHeartRadio.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you guys so much. And stick around. We'll come back in about 10-ish minutes for questions and answers. Excellent. So I'm sharing my screen again. And let's see. Great. So just a few more things to touch on before we get to more Q&A. But first, maybe a huge thank you to Claire and Cathy for sharing their wisdom with us. A couple more strategies to talk through. The first, I want to share a little bit of how we at FreeWill solve the anonymous plan giving problem, because it can be easily replicable on your side. So in early 2019, which now feels like decades ago, we were getting a lot of feedback like this. People said, we love FreeWill, it helps us reach donors, etc., but we're concerned about how many donors are choosing to remain anonymous, which means not telling the organization that they're making planned gifts. And this is obviously a big blocker in effective stewardship. It hurts the potential to turn them into near-term major donors. And so at the time, 42% of folks who made bequests on FreeWill chose to share their information on the site. This is actually a lot more than usual. So in some research that we published in the Stanford Social Innovation Review, we found that among donors who do include nonprofit organizations in their wills or estate plans, fewer than 25% notify the organization at all. And at some national organizations, this number is as low as 7%, meaning that only about 1 in 13 or 1 in 14 gifts are known about beforehand, which obviously ruins any stewardship ideas. And so we have this culture of experimentation, and we kept running tests, and we tried to do so much. And then my colleagues, Jada and Fred, who are just wonderful, came up with a 7th test, and we were about to give up. And that actually doubled the percentage of donors who agreed to share their information. So now what I'm going to do is show you what that test was so that you can use it in your own work here. So this is what we asked. We said, will you make the work of nonprofits easier by letting them know who you are? Anonymous gifts may be less helpful because they often cannot be included in planned giving goals. Now, we didn't expect this to be much better, but it triggered something in humans that totally changed the data overall. And now way over 70% of folks share their information, which is 3 times the national average. The reason this works, we think, is that people think less about giving their information to Dartmouth or the Red Cross or this big institution, and more think about the single person or the team working very hard at the nonprofit. And they can visualize a face and a person who seems very human compared to this great institution or even a small institution. So we'll send the slides around after, and you can use this language yourself, but it's just been shown in our data to be wildly effective compared to basically everything else that we've ever tried. So really interesting stuff, and we're really happy to discover that. Second is solving the anonymous donors in QCD and STOP. And so here, as we mentioned earlier, almost 3/4 of nonprofits say that not receiving donor information is the single biggest challenge around qualified charitable distributions. And most donors, as we said, do not know their info is not being shared. The result is that you have angry and frustrated donors who go unstewarded because you don't even know who they are to thank them. So what Amnesty International is doing, and we're lucky to partner with them here, is they've created a site around qualified charitable distributions. But this is sort of interesting. In addition to being able to make a gift, so we've worked with them to make sure that all of the right forms for all the different custodians is there, but also you can complete manually or over the phone. And then if you see this sort of the second line here, it says, I've already made a QCD gift to Amnesty, and I need a tax acknowledgement letter. So what this is uncovering people who've already made the gift, as opposed to simply helping people make new gifts. Both of those are important, but here you can now steward someone and get QCD gift year after year after year, and hopefully becoming a beneficiary designee as well, for those of you in planned giving. So really cool. And you can do something very similar with stock that says, great, tell me about the gift you already made, etc. If you are putting your own website together, a couple things you might want to think about. You might want to have links on this website to create your own qualified charitable distribution. You can do the same thing for stocks and donor advised funds as well. So this is just QCD language, but it would be very similar. To request a tax acknowledgement letter for a gift you've already made. Now, these are not tax receipts because these are not deductible gifts, but that's a different topic for another time. But you do want that letter in case they get audited, download the forms you need, or learn more about QCDs. And so you want these different options. So regardless of where the donor is in the stage, you can begin to capture that information and steward them effectively. Third thing, and Claire and Cathy made some really good points around here, just to echo, asking for non-monetary help. People often think of stewardship only as giving or thanking to a donor, whereas asking can bring people much closer to the organization. So I believe the Diana Belk woman from Girl Scouts not only is a volunteer, but also continues to be a donor, a very significant one, because she's so tightly tied to the organization. So Cathy mentioned this a little bit, but if you're naming a new society, if you're thinking about new exhibits at your museum, if you are doing any sort of decision where people can have input, but not necessarily decision-making power, it's a really good way to have that conversation and get people thinking deeply about the organization. The other thing is something like, can we connect you with a young college student, a young high school student to give job advice, or to connect you with someone who is being served by the organization? And if you can help them, you'll then want to help them even more through future financial gifts. And so asking for non-monetary help, or thinking about other ways to engage in volunteerism, as opposed to simply reward or thank or feature or steward donors, is a really good way to actually have exactly the same effect, often to an even greater degree. Also, last one, we really love writing handwritten thank you notes, given how rare people are getting these. Folks can, you can imagine someone who's in a legacy society, for instance, writing welcome notes to new society members about why they are giving, or why they are welcoming them, and why it's so important to them. And this type of communication, as Claire mentioned, sort of the introduce people at the party, is really, really powerful and a really great volunteer opportunity that people can do from home whenever they want to. All right, a couple of ideas from you all that I wanted to share that were really excellent in terms of stewardship. So someone sends 5 thank you notes every Friday, and it works wonders. Again, these notes are just gold. Cathy mentioned knocking people's socks off. So on National Sock Day, one organization says branded socks with the message, "You knock our socks off." Just a cool idea. Custom letters that show the impact of their giving. For, I assume this is Friends of the High Line, walks on the High Line, and you can point out the very specific things that are being funded by this gift, which is really cool. VIP receptions with gala speakers when there are galas, obviously not this year as much. And then a special Valentine's Day cards during Heart Month. So sending Valentine's Day cards to your major donors is a really great, nice touch. Super cheap, not very time intensive, but very thoughtful. A couple more. So periodically sending an email thanking donors for their support from one of the shelter animals. So you write in the voice of a dog or a cat in this case, which is cute, obviously only applicable to a couple of types of organizations, but you can imagine that really striking folks and bringing a smile to their faces. Another organization says they host twice yearly seminars as a benefit for legacy supporters, in which we collaborate with the Academy of Sciences and other like-minded organizations. Here are the topics. The key thing here is you can actually do events with other nonprofits and not feel like you're going to lose your donors. And so if you are a small shop and you're thinking about how do we do more, you might want to team up with a couple of different other local organizations and bring one speaker, or have one Zoom event with one speaker. And so there's not a lot of collaboration that we see here, but actually this is probably a great moment to do so as people are a little bit strapped for resources. Okay, one of my last ideas, I really love this, connecting donors with musicians. This is a symphony. Currently, we're working on videos of two top donors where the musicians record a brief personalized thank you and then play a short piece. I know our donors are going to love it. So this is a great idea. These musicians need things to do. You can imagine this being incredibly resonant with donors. and really thoughtful and something they'll share with their friends in a way that will bring in other folks as well. So really cool. To Claire's point earlier, this is something you could post on Facebook and say our musicians are sending notes to the folks in our Legacy Society or our whatever circle. Here's a great one from Sarah, the violinist. And then you can use it to highlight the benefits to other people as a way of bringing in new gifts. All right, so wrapping up there, we'll get to questions in a moment. A couple things I wanted to call out that have been added to our resources page. My colleague Simone, who is both strategically great, but also a brilliant writer, has written a complete guide to donor stewardship that's there and free. Some more donor email templates, phone scripts, etc. We'll also do on Thursday a demo of the QCD tools, the planned and major giving tools, etc., and some case studies. Feel free to join. There's also a new article for folks on how to make the most of Make a Will Month, which is in August. So as you're thinking about your communication strategy there, just go to resources.freewill.com, and that's there and totally free for you. All right, let's do some questions. So first, please fill out the survey in the Zoom chat for feedback and RSVPs. The next webinar is going to be on August 18th. So we'll talk about how to structure year-end fundraising plans, especially given all the complexity that 2020 has. We'll do that in 2 parts because it's such a big topic. So August 18th will be the first one. If you miss the first one, you can always watch the recording so don't feel like you'll be stuck there. If you have any creative ideas at all that you want featured in a future webinar, just share them with me. That's my email address. And then Cathy and Claire would also love to hear from you. And that is Cathy and Claire's email addresses. So let's dive into some questions. Victoria asks, and maybe Cathy, we'll give this to you first. What would your advice be to a very small organization with limited funds? So if there's nothing to give people or there's not a lot of money to purchase things, how might you think about making the most of it for a very small organization?
Perfect, thank you.
Welcome
Yeah,
back,
I love
by
that
the way.
question because it goes back to what Claire and I were speaking about earlier, in that good stewardship is more about how they feel the gratitude from your organization, not in the things that you give them or the things that you send them. So, you know, there's a famous quote, and I'm forgetting who said it, but you know, just make sure that people know how you feel about them versus the things that you say to them. So, and if somebody can remember who said that, that would be awesome.
I think it's a Maya Angelou quote.
Maya Angelou, that's what I was thinking, and I slaughtered it. It wasn't even anywhere near as articulate as she said.
Okay.
But my thought on this, and it's a great question, is just literally good stewardship is how you make them feel. So you can do phone calls, you can send little notes, you can go visit them. Even during the pandemic, one of the things that I've been recommending my small charities do is swing by and deliver a little bundt cake on their porch, or take some flowers by and then call them and let them know that you've done that, or maybe call them beforehand. But either way, there's things that you can do that cost little to nothing and that will have a huge impact on how they feel.
Well,
Yeah,
one
that's
little
a great
thing.
point. And
Yes.
I'll just put in one plug, is that it's another great opportunity to use volunteers. So if you want someone else to bake the bundt cake or the cookies and drop it off, people have plenty of time. As many of you know, things like yeast is selling out because people do so much baking during quarantine. So it's another great opportunity that may be cheap and really will give someone an act of love that they can perform. Claire, what were you going to say?
Well, I'm always about raising the profile of planned giving, or creating more visibility for planned giving. So perhaps you could send a letter or some kind of communication, an email to a certain donor base that you have, or a group of volunteers, and say, we're a small organization and we don't have extra money for things, but we would like to do something nice for our Legacy Society donors. They've done this wonderful thing. They've included the charity in their plans. Does anybody own a small business or something and could provide 15 to 20 gifts that we could give, or 10 gifts that we could give to our new Legacy Society donors? And then you're doing 2 things. You're asking for something for free, but you're also promoting planned giving to a whole audience of likely planned giving prospects. So I'm all about like trying to leverage anything that you already have and talk about planned giving as much as possible.
Yeah, I really love this question from Marion. She says, any thoughts on how we can use the current times to shift some of the quote unquote exclusive work we do with major donors? Ultimately, you know, we are potentially contributing to the increasing wealth gap by treating, you know, major donors who tend to be very wealthy differently than everybody else. I'll give one thought while you guys think about it. You know, I think that one of the things that is underutilized is similar circles or recognition for longtime volunteers or people that are contributing in non-monetary ways. And so if you have been a volunteer for 10 years, there should be a circle for that, and you should be invited to the VIP reception at the gala or other things like that. And so you do still want to be able to treat folks that are giving significant wealth away in a way that helps them give more, frankly, but also you want to be able to recognize even longtime staff members in a special way or on top of longtime volunteers. And so it's an important recognition that there are multiple ways to give besides simply writing checks and similar.
Well, we know in planned giving that a lot of your planned gifts just come from longtime donors and it's not the amount that they've been giving. They might have been giving $5 or $10 a year, but they've been doing it for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. And those are excellent planned giving prospects. So it's not about the people giving a lot of money. It's just about people who give consistently.
Yeah. Claire, we have a great question from Catherine that you might be well informed on, which is, okay, do you have suggestions for how to steward groups in a broad way versus one-to-one? If you're a large college or something, you may have just too many major donors, et cetera. And with a relatively small team, you can't do the coffee chats and all those things with all of them.
Exactly. Large organizations are much different than, say, a small college where a lot of your donors live locally. So you can give them VIP tickets to the tailgate party and all this other stuff on campus. So those small colleges and schools have an easier time with that kind of stewardship. So for large, I have worked for several large organizations, and it is more about like keeping in touch with people. And we find that it's not like the monetary, it's not like you're sending them, expensive gifts and Tiffany crystal or anything like that. It's more about just making a connection. And I found that like surveys have worked really well, and you can send them to different like groups of your donors, like really make it niche. So if you could find like people who were like former volunteers who are also this kind of donor and they all live in this state or something like that, you can do kind of a niche survey. And it's nice like to send a little gift along with it, and something people love, refrigerator magnets and stickers. It's amazing. And I don't discount the little inexpensive gifty item, because many years ago, before I even worked in planned giving, I was visiting a friend and she said, oh, I have to go over to my neighbor Mildred's house or whatever. I got to bring back this rolling pin I borrowed. So we go over there and there was this old lady, not too old, but like really cool, really talkative. I just loved her. And I was glancing at her. I kept glancing at her refrigerator, and she had three magnets on her refrigerator, and one was like for the electric company with like the name of that, one was from a vacation, and the other one said the whatever university legacy society. And she had these only 3 magnets, and that was like right in the middle. And I don't even think I knew anything about planned giving at the time, but when I started working in planned giving, I was like, oh, that lady's in one of these legacy societies. So people tend to really like that. So if you have a large organization, you could make a tote bag or something, and you can make all this stuff, great stuff on Vistaprint, or like you can go on Yeti and get a Yeti mug or something and send people things. So you can just send people things in the mail, and even with a large group, you can do a mailing, but kind of niche it out. Like I don't like to do like big mass mailings. I like to kind of like this month we're going to focus on these people, then next month these people, and so do maybe some niche mailings are a good way to steward people. Also, like news is a good way to steward people. So for a large organization, if you already have some kind of newsletter, maybe create another, like an insider newsletter for your like maybe higher end people, your planned giving people, and send them actual news, not things like where there's a will, there's a way, or stuff like that, like little articles that are just templated. Send them like real news saying like, well, in March, we're going to be like, leasing this office space, or we're going to be, hiring these people, or we're starting a new internship program, like things other people don't know. Like let people feel like they're in the know because they're special. So news is a great way to make people feel special. And you can do that on a mass basis.
Another thing along that line that I would love to just throw out there as a suggestion is don't forget the beneficiaries of your mission. So if it is a hospital, maybe you can get some thank you notes from grateful patients that are just generic thank you notes, and you can individually send those out. If your organization does anything with kids, people love kids art, just set up an art table. If you have waiting rooms, set up little things that say, we'd like to send people who support our mission thank you notes. Please feel free to write one. Always think about how you can utilize the beneficiaries, because nothing is more touching than a thank you note from someone who actually received services. And it doesn't have to have the individual's name on there. It could just say Mary. And it doesn't, if you want to make sure you're honoring their privacy. And same with children. I mean, again, just utilize those opportunities to create customized things that can be sent out.
Yeah, and I'd like to reinforce that, because I like to always leverage things you already have instead of reinventing the wheel. So for instance, when I worked for a large nature organization, we did a holiday card with a photo from the organization's photo contest, right? They have a nature photo contest. So something you could do with a large organization is, to your plan giving donors, you could send them like they could vote on it. Like, here are the 4 things we're thinking about using for this year's holiday card. Which one do you like best? We're only asking, our Legacy Society donors. And they could just check it off and send it back to you. So there's just little things like asking their opinion, or like Cathy says, things that serve the mission. Like if you're a hospital and you've got a pediatrics ward and you have this awesome, print that a kid drew, well, you can duplicate that print and make it into a greeting card and send it to them. And say, you're the first ones, we just made this. You're the first one to get it. You're the first, you're one of the first people to get this cool card. Easy. It's easy.
I love that. All right. So we'll wrap there, because people have to get to their next Zoom meeting or their lunch or whatever it may be. But another huge thank you to Cathy and Claire for joining us. Thank you for everyone who filled out the survey and for taking some time out today. And we will see you in a few weeks to talk about end of year, which is coming a little bit too quickly.
Oh, wow.
But maybe 2020 can't end soon enough.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys again, and see everybody very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. It was great. Nice format.
It was fun.